的决心和意志是坚定不移。我们希望通过将军这次来访，我们就有关问题能够很好的谈。
Where there are areas of disagreement, our desire is to deepen cooperation while managing our differences.
On Tuesday, the head of the United States Pacific Command met with Chinese military officials to discuss the U.S. Navy operations in the South China Sea. These operations, according to the U.S. Pacific Command commander, have been conducted worldwide for decades, and the Navy will, of course, continue the freedom of navigation operations. The commander said that the operations should not be viewed as a threat or come as a surprise to anyone, even though the Chinese have criticized these operations recently. Joining me now is professor at the University of California, Irvine, and author of Crouching Tiger, What China's Militarism Means for the World, Peter Navarro. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Liz, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So you've written extensively on Asia. You've worked there, you've lived there. What is your take on what's going on in the South China Sea right now? Is this some sort of power play, or is this just business as usual?
I think this is the tip of a very, very big iceberg that can threaten here the Titanic. A little background. The incident itself involves 5 submerged reefs in the South China Sea. South China Sea is the largest body of water after the 5 oceans, and 1/3 of all global shipping goes through it. So it's a really, really critical sea route to American commerce and commerce around the world. Now, what you haven't read in the press, and shame on them, is that those islands that China is creating, they actually took those at gunpoint by force, some from the Philippines, some from Vietnam, some years ago. So their aggression in the South China Sea started a while ago. And what they're trying to do, what they have done successfully, is what they do is they cover these submerged reefs with sand, and then they put in very long runways, bigger than the runway, by the way, at San Diego, which I'm sure you fly in and out of. And then they put in things like sonar to track our submarines in the area. They'll put in telemetry so that they can guide cruise missiles to hit Vietnamese ships or Japanese destroyers or U.S. aircraft carriers. And these are strung together in what is known in the parlance in the Pentagon as the string of pearls Chinese strategy. They're not isolated fortress garrisons, but rather stretched throughout the Asia Pacific, from the Indian Ocean all the way up to Dalian and the China Sea. So it's a serious matter. We are not challenging the right to the territory itself, which we should be doing. All we are doing is doing these freedom of navigation patrols. Now, this is an area of conflict. For America, this is a red line, okay? What I mean by that is that if China were to threaten freedom of navigation in Asia, this would be something that we would basically enter into conflict with the Chinese. It's totally unacceptable. Chinese are pushing on it, and they're not just pushing on these islands. What they want to do is change the 12-mile territorial limit in Asia to 200 miles, which would effectively push our commercial and military ships out of the region as we know it. So
is this a military objective, or is this an economic objective? What is their overall goal by doing this? Because it seems like you mentioned, that they're wanting to detect U.S. subs, but they're also wanting to block or control the shipping route. What is their objective by these moves?
Well, let's think about Asia as a strategic and economic entity, and let's channel, if we will, historically, Imperial Japan back in the 30s. If you remember what Imperial Japan's agenda was, it was basically to secure the natural resources and the markets of Asia so that it could grow in this so-called co-prosperity sphere. China basically is trying to do the same thing as the 21st century hegemon, the imperialist, in Asia for the same reasons. It wants the natural resources. For example, in the South China Sea, around those contested islands, there are rumored to be oil and gas reserves comparable to that of the Persian Gulf. China wants to claim them, and they're running oil rigs from Vietnam. So there's the economics of it. And then strategically, 100 years ago, China went through its so-called century of humiliation. I mean, in the 30s, by the time the 30s rolled around, just about every foreign power had carved up China in some way, totally abused it. So they do have a legitimate concern about protecting the homeland, as we do. They have a legitimate concern about protecting their global trade routes, as we do. The big difference is that they have territorial designs on all sorts of places in the East and South China Sea and on the Indian subcontinent. And they're pressing that. So what's in it for them, Liz? It's basically they want to be the hegemon of Asia.
They want to be the most powerful nation.
Yeah, they want. Yeah, and look, I mean, let's be honest. We're a nation right now whose military is in severe decline because of the Obama administration's policies. Our Navy has shrunk to a third that of the Reagan years. We're under budget sequestration, which basically has chopped the defense budget. China, and we're spread out all over the globe, distracted in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, right? Meanwhile, let's look at China. They are able to take their power, project it regionally with laser force. Their shipyards are busy, unlike ours. Their factories are busy churning out weapons. They have, at this point, they've already accumulating the largest submarine fleet in the world, as ours is shrinking. They have the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the world because, unlike the Russians and the United States, they're not subject to the nuclear arms proliferation treaties. They have the world's largest inventory of sea mines. And you've seen many times now how they've tested anti-satellite weapons to knock our satellites out of the skies so that they could gain the strategic high ground. So they're doing everything that they need to do in order to project power in Asia, often by stealing our technology. And we seem to be doing everything but talking about being serious about that. I mean, it's kind of laughable that the Obama administration is strutting a few warships over there in the South China Sea. It's the opposite of Teddy Roosevelt. You know, we're talking loudly, but our stick is very small at this point.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. How the Obama administration hasn't even really legitimized the threat of how they're bulking up their military. We're sitting over here cutting our military back, cutting our budgets back, while China's doing exactly the opposite. And like you said, they're not even spread all around the world like we are. They're concentrated, so the strength of their military seems even stronger because they're able to focus that all in one area. For our viewers, check out crouchingtiger.net. You can find Peter's latest book. And Peter, thank you for joining me tonight. Next, Obama is desperate to leave a legacy. This time, he's tackling criminal justice reform. But will his reform make our nation a safer place? The Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act of 2015 is coming up. Stay tuned.